Black Lives Matter and white privilege. Hello everybody, my name is Mark van Straten. Welcome to my channel, Mark Being Human. And if you've never subscribed to my channel, I'd love you to push the button down below here and subscribe. So, Black Lives Matter and white privilege. Some of you may be asking, well, what do you know about this stuff and who are you to talk about this stuff? And you know what? You'll be right. I don't think I'm the most credible person in the world to talk about Black Lives Matter, and maybe a little bit more credible I could speak about white privilege. Over the last few weeks with the George Floyd murder, with other conversations I've had around the subject of Black Lives Matter and racism and etc., you know, these things have been kind of brewing inside of me. So the other day I was just glancing at some of my emails, and there was an email there from a mega church pastor in America writing to his congregation, particularly around racism and about the Black Lives Matter. And in the email I saw these two words, subconscious bias and blindness. And as I read those words, became aware that yes, I have that potential for subconscious bias, and I did some research about it, and of course around blindness. And what I realized is that this whole thing that's going on around the world and the country and in our own country here, South Africa, is about systemic racism. What have I got to say about it? Well, the first thing I want to say about it is that as long as we're doing binary thinking, we're going to get ourselves into a lot of trouble. Binary thinking, what does that mean? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, say for example, that you introduce your friend, your best buddy, to your wife's best buddy, and they hit it off and they start a courtship, and over a period of time they get engaged, and a little later on they get married, and you, the best man at the wedding, and you present a speech, and your wife is the maid of honor and all those kind of things, and then 5 or 6 years later you find out that they're getting divorced, and they're both your friends. And so unbeknownst to them, you remain friends with both of them. Then one of them find out, hey, you can't be friends with my ex. You've got to choose between me or him or her, but you can't be friends with both. That's binary thinking. Now, if we can hold two opposing truths, if we can be friends with both the ex-husband and the ex-wife, then we're holding two opposing forces in tension. And when it comes to the whole thing of Black Lives Matter and white privilege, I realize there's a lot of binary thinking. For example, here in South Africa, people speak about the fact that all lives matter. And what about the farmers that have been murdered on their farms? Why aren't we talking about them? And those are absolutely legitimate questions, and I think they need to be answered. I mean, South Africa is one of the countries that has the highest number of murders per annum of any country in the world. Over 20,000 murders a year, 57 murders on average a day. That means while you're watching this video, potentially 57 people are going to be killed. So all of these things are deplorable. They're unacceptable. And so when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're not diminishing the fact that all lives matter or that farmers are being murdered. But in fact, in this country, people who are gangsters, people who are dying from domestic abuse, people are being killed for all kinds of things. And all of it is totally unacceptable. So what is it about Black Lives Matter that gets everybody worked up? What is it about white privilege that everybody gets riled about? Well, for me, it's an issue of systemic racism. And that's really where I'm making my pitch today. That's where I want to contend with in this video and really in my personal life. If we can stop being binary, yes, we can condemn the deaths that are taking place in our country and around the world that are unnecessary. People who have been murdered, people whose lives have been taken by somebody else. It is wrong, and we need to get fired up about that stuff. Right now, as I share my heart is about systemic racism in our country, of which I've been a contributor in some way, shape or form. You see, a friend of mine, happens to be a black friend, and I love what my daughter says, that sometimes us white South Africans, we think that because we have black friends we don't have any racism inside of us. Well, that's not necessarily true, and my daughter has reminded me of a lot of other things that aren't necessarily true about my perspective and my life. That's why I've got one. Anyway, this black friend of mine, he lives in what traditionally used to be a white neighborhood in South Africa, and him and his wife are part and parcel of a WhatsApp group, a group of people on their phones. They connect with each other, and so that everybody in their community, in their block, can look after each other and communicate with each other. Sometimes my friend and his wife have gone walking out in the morning, in the late evening, and they would see a WhatsApp come up on their phone, and it would be, I can see a BM walking in our street. You say, what's a BM? It's a black male. I mean, how would you feel If you were walking the street and somebody identified you as a potential criminal when you are actually one of their neighbors. When my friend told me that, I was embarrassed. I felt shame. I felt all kind of weird. I don't really know what to say, actually. So the question is, so what now? I know I need to contend with my subconscious bias and my blindness. And there are two ways in which I am contending, and I am trying to understand it. The first is in this binary thinking, which I've already mentioned to you. The second, well, it's part of another story. A few years ago, the whole white privilege thing became sort of in the public domain. And in that domain, I remember a person that was at the same school as I was, some 45 years ago, has written that what he's achieved in life is a result of hard work and not because of his white privilege. And I remember reading it at the time and feeling outraged, because the truth of the matter is not the same. You see, if it comes down to hard work, there are people in this country who've worked as hard as this guy who wrote this post on Facebook. Now, when I think about some of the people in our country who've worked hard, I think of our miners who've gone into the ground, who probably aren't living in the best conditions, who aren't necessarily eating the healthiest diets, and yet are working in the very depths of the earth. Recently, I was coming home from work. I've been commuting once or twice a week to work, into our offices in Mshlonga. On the way back, I see this truck, this big construction, this road construction truck, and on the back of 5 or 6 young black men. And as I look at them and I think to myself about manual labor and what that means, and I wondered what kind of opportunities that these young men have had, what kind of choices they've been able to make about a future for their lives. I've thought to myself, perhaps the only choice they've had is to get any job somewhere, because employment in our country is running way above 33%. And then I thought about the opportunities that would provide for me as a young man. In my high school years, in my final year of high school, I had so many opportunities, I could just about do anything I desired. In fact, my parents took me down to the University of Natal to have an aptitude test so they could match the opportunity with my aptitude, with the kind of person I am. I went through all these tests, and at the end of it, they presented me with 4 or 5 occupations that I should pursue, because I had the opportunity not only to pursue these things, but I had the means by which to do it as well. And so for me, white privilege is really about opportunity. And the fact of the matter is, it's undeniable that if you're born with a white skin, you're going to have more opportunity. Now, not everybody who has a white skin has the same degree of opportunity, but the game has been tilted in your favor. And in my case, it has been overwhelmingly tilted in my favor. And as a result, I've been able to fulfill my dreams and fulfill my aspirations when it comes to the things that I've done with my life. I am privileged, and I have experienced white privilege. And it's my responsibility to steward that white privilege with integrity and with honor. I also know that I have unconscious bias. I mean, that's science. If I walk into a room of strangers, I'm generally going to look for the white male who believes in God, who speaks English, who rides motorbikes and likes to surf. Now, I'm not just saying those are the only people I'll mix with, but my unconscious bias will direct me in that direction. And what I'm missing out on is the person who's not the same gender as me, who doesn't believe in God, who doesn't like motorbikes and surfing and speak English. But nevertheless, that person, as I am, is created in the image of God. And if there's absolutely something that the Bible is clear about, is that we should love one another. Not just love people who are like us, our homogenous groups. And we're living in a world today where we aren't living in these demographically homogenous places. We're mixing with one another. And this is prime opportunity for us to figure out how other people live, how other people believe, what things other people like to do, the uniqueness about their language. You see, unconscious bias will keep me in my huddle, and it'll keep me from fulfilling the destiny that we are all destined to be, and that is to be fully human. And so as I close off today, my appeal is that we'd contend. We'd contend with systemic racism, that we'd recognize it in ourselves and respond to it and become more self-aware. And that secondly, do our best, not just think in a binary way, an either or, but that we can hold a variety of different needs and opportunities, and we can hold them in tension, and that we can in some way contribute towards bringing people together and not divide. As image bearers of God, genuinely find a compassion, a love, a kindness and understanding in one another. It's pretty lofty, I know, but hey, it's a better way to live.